presentation, I've called it Alien Cultures, the project to rehumanize fashion. And the reason I've used this title is because Alien Cultures were a band, a British punk band in the 1980s. And I was really fascinated when some students of mine, I was teaching a fashion history class, and we were looking to uncover histories that we didn't know about. A group of students found out about this band, Alien Cultures. And it made me really sad to hear, in some ways it made me sad to hear about Alien Cultures and hear their music, because it should have been a band that I should have known about. You know, it's from my era, it's from the early 80s. And yet this is something that in all these years, I've never kind of come across. And so how the legacies of erasure continue, and how it's such a big project to expose hidden histories and to really understand why we don't know much about them. So Alien Cultures are getting a bit of a cult kind of following in the UK. A lot of people are kind of coming to them and wanting to know alternative histories of different types of music that haven't kind of been given their credit. The reason I've then called it the project to rehumanize fashion is that I want to make a link between what this band Alien Cultures is saying and how we as a community of fashion educators can really think about how we touch the kinship, the intersectionality, how we can bring those factors much more in a kind of more forceful way, I think, into how we teach fashion. So when I was thinking about this evening and really thinking about pedagogy, one of the areas where I go to really find out more about pedagogy is looking particularly at people who are writing in the field of queer studies, because I think that they can give us lots of hope and give us solidarity in how you go about doing the project of rethinking education. I also think that it's really important for us to really centre the pedagogy and to sometimes take a step back from all the fashion culture and start to see, you know, what other disciplines are doing. We're not alone. We know that across the board, especially in the global north and in a UK context for sure, in philosophy, in sociology, in fine art, in history, in English literature, these questions about the contestations between what is and isn't being learned are at the forefront at the moment. And which is why, for me, the idea of Alien Cultures, this band whose story had been lost and who was speaking about being disconnected from wider society, why it's important that we look to them, and we'll kind of follow a bit more of their themes in a minute. But this quote from the scholar Misawa, who talked about queer race pedagogy for educators in higher education, says that all parts of our identities are shaped by socially constructed positions and memberships to which we belong. Such automatic categorization is embedded in our society as a system and is pervasive in education and at the workplace. Race, sexual orientation, religion, gender, and class are some common social constructs that have a particularly high impact on one's positionality. These lead to generalizations and stereotyping of certain groups that can impact daily lived experience. And somebody had put in the chat box about how we need to decolonize ourselves. And I think certainly it's really clear that we need to understand our own positionality, who we are, and rehumanize ourselves as part of the project to rehumanize our fashion design classroom. So I think as a community, we need to really understand what it is we want to do. Do we want to sit here and start saying we need to think about intersectionality in such a way that we bring in non-Eurocentric perspectives and we have a more inclusive practice? I grew up in London in the 1980s, And this was very much a description of multiculturalism, how in school we started to maybe cook food from India one week, and the next week we might cook food from the Caribbean, and then the next week we might cook food from Germany. The idea was that students, children had to be exposed to different parts of the world, and that would help them understand different types of people and create something that was a much more kind of inclusive idea of and community. Or should we be trying to transform what fashion is altogether? Have we got scope to reimagine how we actually do fashion design completely? Should we be talking about what the shape of a collar is with our students, or should we be rethinking all the criteria for how we make garments? Should we be thinking, as we did during COVID, for many of us, where comfort became the main criteria? What happens if students are thinking about criteria that have yet to be considered because of climate change, new ideas about what energy might be, new jobs that haven't even been created, for example? So I think that for me, the contestation, the real kind of struggle we have is possibly through a reform that maybe looks at things much more through kind of a liberal perspective, and transformation, which arguably could be a much more radical practice altogether. Just put this in context, I'm just going to show 3 minutes and 20 seconds exactly clip of Alien Culture. The clip begins with them playing, and then there's a little bit of an interview.
It's something just how to break find the break. That's not what we're about. We just want to live out our life, run and dance and sing and shout. Trapped in a void and we don't know just which way to turn. This way and that way, but we're still stopped from having fun. First generation, illegal immigrants, second generation, two delinquents.
हेलो। जिस तरह तारा आर्ट्स ग्रुप और हनीफ कुरैशी जैसे एशियाई नौजवान इस मुल्क में अपने तजुर्बे और मसलों का इजहार नए ड्रामे लिखकर कर रहे हैं, उसी तरह एक नया एशियाई पॉप ग्रुप बना है जो गाकर यही कुछ कहने की कोशिश करता है। मौसीकी या संगीत के एतबार से उनका शुमार या गिनती म्यूजिक चार्ट्स यानी मकबूल तरीन गाने वालों में होने में तो शायद अभी देर हो, लेकिन उनका जो पैगाम या समाजी अहमियत है वो काबिले गौर है। हमारी मुलाकात उनसे लंदन में एक रिकॉर्डिंग स्टूडियो में हुई, जहां वो अपने पहले सिंगल रिकॉर्ड के लिए रिहर्सल कर रहे थे। इस ग्रुप में 3 एशियाई और एक अंग्रेज नौजवान शामिल है, लेकिन ग्रुप का नाम आपने एलियन कल्चर क्यों रखा?
We called it Alien Culture after Margaret Thatcher made a speech about immigration in which she said that British people are in danger of being swamped by an alien culture. As we consider ourselves part of the alien culture, we thought it was the best way to call ourselves Alien Culture.
I feel that everyone who stands for something that's different, apart from what the ruling elite like the Tories and including the Labour Party, who are just as bad sometimes, if you don't fit in with their views, their way of thinking, their culture, their morals, then you are alien. As far as that goes, we don't fit in with the normal bourgeois culture. We are alien culture.
Yeah, not only that, but we're alien in a sense that we're caught up in 2 cultures, as one of our songs says, and that is a sort of a new thing, not known before. I mean, we're alien in that sense as well. I mean, sort of on the one half being influenced by the English culture, on the other half by the Asian culture, and hence a new sort of situation arises, a new sort of culture, which doesn't exactly fit in with both.
You want something to belong to, you want something to hold on to. Nothing to read your books, buy white pegs and structureless jackets. Get your own maximum pose down at the disco. Asian youth are where you've been. Asian youth, you wanna be. Asian youth, you've got to return to Asian youth.
all we can hope to achieve as alien culture is to echo the fears, the hopes, the aspirations of a lot of kids, both Asian and white, and hope they can find something to identify with. So something to show that someone cares about them and thinks the way they do.
Thanks for that. So I hope you might have been able to maybe think about some parallels between what this group was saying in 1981 and about the need for creating a new culture, a culture that speaks to these different conversations that are happening in a particular political moment. And I think that, you know, there are many parallels with the political times of the early 80s and the particular period that we're going through now in history. And we can learn from the past, and we can learn about exactly those same conversations they were happening there. So when I saw it, you know, it really helped me also think about who I am. I'm somebody of, my parents were born in India and came to the UK in the 1950s, and that kind of, you know, project to rehumanize fashion by first rehumanizing ourselves and understanding who we are is so important, I think, as part of this project to think about what fashion could be. So I started to think about, you know, what is the dominant narrative that we're having in fashion at the moment. When I do Google searches for books on fashion, even though the algorithm on my computer will be for my specialism looking at fashion and race, I will still see predominantly books that are about, you know, maybe 19th or 20th century. They're normally about a gender binary of the female body. They're normally about fashion from not just European, but, you know, Western European, British, French, Italian fashion. And it's normally books that have white women on the covers. And really starting off classes by thinking about what this dominant narrative is helps us to think what's absent. Can I have the next slide, please? We see the same happening in magazines in our college libraries and in our fashion museums, where at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, we see this very particular take on what fashion is. And so it makes you start to think, if, you know, that fashion that doesn't fit into that criteria is alien. If we start to think about Muslim bodies who might have a different take on how you might make a swimwear garment, and how different the leotard body block is compared to a velkini, for example. I often ask students to tell me in class to name an African fashion designer, you know, to help understand to what extent their knowledge has already become embedded with a Eurocentric perspective. And despite 54 countries, I don't think I've been doing this for about 10 years, I don't think I've actually had one. I've had one who's mentioned stylists, but in London, I haven't heard any student able to tell me a contemporary African fashion designer. And so it makes us think, well, what could fashion be? What happens if we start to really start our class with global South fashions? I've been doing that by using saris in workshops. What if we start to create speculative fashions? We don't have the history books that exist, but what happens if we ask students to speculate on what fashion could be and reimagine it? What if we had a history of women's everyday clothing or emerging Myanmar fashions, for example? And what if we started to think about a much more relational fashion design process? We changed our mannequins, we worked to real bodies that had, you know, fat around their middle, like most of us do. And we thought about the role of capitalism and started to work on one-off garments, not ones that had to be standardized. And what if we reimagined our fashion design department altogether? What if we brought in digital spaces like the bottom left image, which is a Slack space? What if we brought food into the classroom? We nurtured our students with and sustained them with food during, particularly in UK context, we have a cost of living crisis here. What if we crossed disciplines and we went into the fine art space? And what if we taught our students outside of our classes in different parts of the building? I wanted to end on this slide to say that what Alien Cultures has really taught me is that I'm quite proud to be an alien and to centre alien cultures in my classroom. This is a picture of me when I graduated from the Glasgow School of Art in 1995. I'm the person on the extreme right, fourth step up with much shorter hair. I was the only non-white student, the only brown student, the only student of colour who graduated that year. And this image circulated after the Glasgow School of Art burnt down twice in recent years. And when I looked at it, and my friends were all kind of like talking about how young we looked and making jokes about it, I saw something else. I saw somebody who was quite alone, really, and who didn't talk about different parts of their personality and didn't dare bring up non-Western garments in their classroom and didn't raise issues around the Eurocentric curricula. And I'm proud to show this picture now because, as I'm saying, I think the job for us as a community of educators is to seek out the aliens, build solidarity with them, and teach more alien cultures. Thank you.